Good evening and welcome. I'm Kelli Richards, CEO of the All Access Group and the host of All Access Radio. I've spent over 2 decades as a catalyst and trailblazer in the digital music and entertainment arena. As a super connector, I create powerful alliances at the nexus of technology and entertainment, bringing together leading innovators, entrepreneurs, and forward-thinking creative talent. And as a trusted advisor, I work with high achievers as a strategist and coach, ensuring they have the insights, expertise, support, and connections they need to create greater impact and more meaning in their work and in their lives. Tonight's guest on the show is Lisa Wellman. Lisa is a digital storytelling expert with a 30-year career in technology and marketing that includes positions from systems development to business development to executive management, and in fact was my boss for several years during my time at Apple. As VP of Worldwide Publishing, Entertainment, and New Media Markets at Apple, Lisa and her team, myself included, built a $3 billion revenue stream that accounted for 60% of Apple's bottom line. She's held executive-level positions in Fortune 100 companies, headed venture-funded entrepreneurial initiatives, and provided strategic business consultation for Xerox, Kodak, and HP, among many others. She's widely respected in the technology world. Currently, Lisa is in charge of business development and project management at N Squared Solutions, a software development services company, which I'm guessing is based in Seattle, but she'll fill us in. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Kelli. It's kind of nice to be working together again.
It's great, the opportunity.
Yeah, N Squared Solutions is actually an Australian company,
but
they do a lot of business with Microsoft technology. I happen to be in Seattle, and so I provided a good link for them, and it's kind of interesting to see what's going on in multi-touch, multi-user systems.
Yeah, well, you're always involved with something dynamic, and of course we do work in a global world these days, so I would shot in the dark that it might be in Seattle, but it certainly wouldn't have to be.
Right.
So I like to start by asking about your early years and sort of moving into a little bit of a linear progression. Would love to hear, Lisa, if you could share with our listeners a bit about some of your early influences and what you were, being a young person and trying to figure out what you were going to do for your career. What was the first glimpse of clarity you had that ended up propelling you towards the successes that you've achieved today?
Well, I even as a child, I held little classrooms and made other children, be my students as I instructed them. So I think that teaching was something that I navigated to fairly early, and in fact, that's my degree is in teaching and psychology. But I really find that and it's an important point that you brought up, when I talk to my mentees, I mentor at the University of Washington Foster School of Business with the MBA program, and when I talk to them, I think it's so important to really define where your passion is. And, what are those things that, kind of really fulfill you and make you happy? And one of the key things for me has always been creativity. Being around creativity is a real turn-on, being associated with creative people doing creative things. So that's one of the areas that's probably driven the kinds of things that I've chosen to do. And then probably another important part of who I am and how I've built my career, my life, has been just from Antioch College, the motto, I went to Antioch, and the motto is be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity.
Wow.
And so making it's pretty good, isn't it?
I love it.
Making a positive difference in the world, is pretty important to me. But when we narrow it down as far as my tech career is concerned, my husband went into technology, which was a very strange, I hadn't planned on that at all. He went into technology, and I thought, well, I better figure out what this is, if I ever want to have a conversation with this man. And so one of the key moments, that really kind of changed my life, he and I was doing office and facilitation and background work for him and his business, and we went to a conference in Rosemont, right near the Hyatt Hotel in Chicago. I can remember the whole incident so clearly. And as we were signing in, the woman turned and looked at me and said, "Oh, honey, if you're with him, you can get in for free." And for the first time in my life, it hit me that she didn't even pause for a minute and think that he might be with me. And I just said, okay, I want my own credentials. I'm building my own career. And so, I went off and I did it. He at that time we were in the Chicago area, and he said, if you really want to get some training, Allstate Insurance offers courses. If you pass the test and they take you on, they will train you. And I became a programmer on IBM mainframes in what turned out to be 5 languages, and that was the start of my tech career.
That's amazing. I didn't even know some of that. And, for me, you've always been about creativity, as you said, and the blurring of technology and creativity and the leveraging of technology to enhance creativity. And You've always been a leader and
thank you.
A trusted mentor of mine. So, a lot of people don't know that I had done a detour over at Silicon Graphics for 18 months during my Apple career, and you brought me back. And so had you not done that, I probably wouldn't have been able to achieve some of the things I wanted to do in that other part of my Apple career with the music and entertainment stuff. So I'm forever grateful for that. And that's a good segue to talk about that piece where we crossed over. You were initially recruited by Apple in 1991, I believe, to head up commercial publishing for U.S. markets at Apple. And then, of course, while we were working together, you got promoted to VP of Worldwide Publishing, Entertainment, and New Media Markets. And I can remember the day when that happened. I can remember where we were. I can remember you telling me you were so excited. What was it like to enter and excel within the wild world that we knew as Apple at that time?
Well, certainly I can honestly say it was certainly as rewarding as anything I could have dreamed. The chance to work with great people and ultimately to pull together a team of terrific people. So, that was really very special. You and a number of other people I could name were handpicked to be part of a team, and I always feel as somebody who's the team leader, you go out and you find people who know more than you do, and you facilitate the hell out of it and let them do their thing. And so it was exciting. It was very entrepreneurial, surprisingly so. And that turned out to be something that I really responded to. I would not necessarily have said that I loved that environment, but building something from scratch, I know I went to Apple and I said, okay, I'm ready, guys. What do you want me to do? And they looked at me and said, well, that's what we hired you for. You figure out what to do.
Yeah. And we did have a surprising amount of autonomy. I use the word deliberately surprising, as you did, because people think of Apple in the years since when Steve came back, and there really wasn't as much autonomy. But we had quite a bit of it, happily.
Oh, no. I mean, when they finally decided that, I kept fighting that we needed to stay focused on the creative markets. Apple was trying for many years, as those old-timers will remember, to focus on, the business market when we really had such amazing tools for the creative market and really a feeling that keeping that alive was such an important thing, and it was keeping faith with our base. You have to say that. And so I think that was, it was just really important that we did that and got to do it.
And you'll be able to bear witness to my running around the halls saying, music's the killer app, and not a lot of people really believed that. And look what happened when Steve came back. The whole thing was revolutionized because of Apple,
Right. Well, certainly the time was right because of the Apple name and the Beatles and all the issues with legal stuff. There were certain markets that Apple had to be.
Role in keeping the pilot light lit until he did come back.
Absolutely. And you can also testify. I mean, as I went around the world, I know that being, representing the particular market that we did, it was certainly greeted with open arms anywhere in the world. We were making a difference, and we were really revolutionizing, an entire industry. I mean, And there were challenges. I remember over a 2-year period when literally in the United States we lost 1,500 typesetting businesses. As we went from proprietary systems to the desktop, there was really disruption in many markets. And however,
you'll recall that we predicted the demise of the newspaper and the magazine. We talked about that happening.
Yes.
And that was, 15 years before it actually happened.
Well, the handwriting was on the wall as we saw that these $1 million machines, proprietary machines, were going to be replaced by the various desktops. I remember we did a benchmarking test between I'm not going to mention any names, one proprietary system and the Mac, and we were even surprised at how well the Mac did, and this is in early days. So it just got better and better, and certainly it was, we were in the right place, speaking to the right market with the right tools. So it was
and with the right
exciting
leadership and vision. Again, I give you all the credit in the world for navigating the politics, especially being women in such a male-dominated culture. And you really fought hard. I witnessed it multiple times to get the resources and make sure that things were kept on the front burner,
Yeah.
So I'll do credit.
It was interesting. Thank you.
Lisa, what role would you say that story had at Apple during the years that you were there?
I was thinking about that when you had mentioned that to me before, and I came in with Scully as CEO and remained through, when Steve came back, I was still there and then left shortly after. And I was just thinking about the fact that story played such a critical role in my mind because Steve would never left. I don't think for any of us the concept, the story of Steve Jobs and Apple was alive. It was not, it was real. It was almost a mythology.
Well, you remember me saying, and I know you're going to remember this, I said it repeatedly, there's only one person that can save this company during the darkest times. And people would laugh and say, he's not coming back, he's running 2 other companies. And I would say, it's his company to kill or keep.
Yeah.
And he did, thank goodness.
There were a lot of keepers of the flame. There were a lot of people who really bought into the idea that we could make such a difference in the world and that technology, well-designed technology that allowed people, that empowered the individual was so important, and that, all those aspects of the design of the technology, the whole experience of using the technology and being able to represent that concept, the concept of, that Steve imbued to the world with our marketing, with our own experiences and our own contacts with our, with the marketplace.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I think of, what was the story at Apple? It was certainly, there were many other things that were discourse stories happening at this, kind of at the time where people would go off in various other places that were very Steve Jobs-like, but at the core, I think that there were those people there who carried the torch, and it was alive inside of us.
Yeah, and never really went away even now. Would you say that Apple helped redefine the way that artists create and tell their stories?
Oh, absolutely. And especially, we had a tool. We were developing tools that really recognized the fact that it wasn't just stories weren't just words either. That they were often on a printed page, but they were also on a screen being told, and they were on big screens and little screens. And I don't know if you remember, but I remember when we partnered with Adobe and the American Film Institute and Apple got together, and we created an event, which was, I just think, for me personally, life-changing as I experienced it, called Digital Storytelling for the New Millennium. And
that was my pet project. Did you forget that?
I didn't. Okay.
I'm so grateful to you for underwriting it in conjunction with, I believe, with Carlos Montalvo from the QuickTime team. Didn't we get him behind us to make that event happen on Kauai?
Absolutely. Well, I wasn't going to mention Kauai because it sounds so self-serving. It just happened to be on Kauai.
It happened to be on Kauai. It wasn't about Kauai per se, but yes, it was a fabulous, life-changing event for us and for everybody who got to be there. And you'll recall the caliber of people that were pulled together for that event between Adobe and the Film Institute and everybody and us.
Absolutely. And I do remember especially, I can picture that one evening where, the master of the digital storytelling at the time was Dana Atchley. What a lovely, lovely human being, a lovely man. Mm-hmm. And he actually started his presentation by turning on the computer, and on the computer was a fire. And he talked about the fact that, we've been telling stories as humans. We've been telling stories from the caveman times.
Around a fire.
Yes. And now the fire was now on a digital screen. And he told wonderful stories about his family. And I remember he was one of, I think, 3 children. And every year of their lives, on one special day, I'm not sure whether it was Christmas or something, their parents took a picture of the 3 of them standing in exactly the same place, and they each did a 360 revolve. Yeah. And he was able to bring all of that film into, telling the story of his family. And so he really combined in a personal way for the first time. It wasn't, the movies. It wasn't a big production thing. It was a very personal experience. He combined, kind of all aspects of digital technology in being a raconteur and talking, for 40 minutes about his family and his life and bringing us all
in a very heartfelt but also technology-driven mixed media way, where he was pulling some of that old family footage and photographs and the Boy Scout handbook and all the tidbits that he'd pulled together and the strange places he went in his motor home and all the weird things he saw on Route 66. He really showed people what was possible with your own artifacts and leveraging the technology so that kids could combine with their grandparents and create CDs and websites of the grandparents' memories, And that was the beginning of that whole digital storytelling movement.
Yeah, you probably remember that one of the things as we wanted to really speak to the local population of the place that we were in Hawaii. And so we had incorporated some of the stories in some of our events, some of the stories of the Hawaiian people. And in exchange, we had workshops where we had the computers set up so we could work with local people and that they could bring their stories of their culture and their families into the digital space. I was really proud that we got to do that. That was a great part of the experience, as well as having all the professionals.
You're so right when you say how pivotal that event was, how memorable and how impactful. People like Graham Nash were there, Todd Rundgren, filmmakers, all manner of the people that were on the forefront of using media and technology to tell stories in unique ways.
Yes, and of course, you remember that last evening there. I'm going to make a lot of people very jealous, but we had Graham Nash was on the stage in front of the audience, and Crosby was being beamed from, I think, somewhere in California. And we had that concert at the end, which was
we did, and Richard, there was just so many people, and of course we can't mention that whole thing without reference to the fact that Dana's wife Denise was also his partner in all of that. Then carried the torch with the Digital Storytelling Festival for many years once Dana had passed, and it really did become a pivotal movement that Apple and our work together was at the forefront of.
And so, one of the things that was really also interesting, I remember about that same time that I attended a conference called Digital World. I think that was one of the part of the things that the Siebold organization did. And I also remember there listening to James Cameron talk about creating, I think it was the second Terminator movie.
Right.
And how for years he knew the story. The story was in his head, but he just didn't have the technology to create that molten metal that he really, that was at the core of the story, that that was a vision that he saw and he wanted to demonstrate and show. So I think that technology has enabled, as it becomes more and more sophisticated, artists have used it and storytellers have used it in different ways. Certainly we've had, Dana just using his desktop computer and tools that are now available to really everyone, and James Cameron using some of the more sophisticated technology, that has come along, and and others. And I think, a lot of this technology in other forms was available before, but wildly expensive, just really not available to many people.
Well, during that brief stint that I did at Silicon Graphics, of course, that's when Spielberg was doing Jurassic Park, and he needed the horsepower of those kinds of machines to be able to make it a reality. And, of course, they were wildly expensive. And for lack of some of that in an affordable, nimble fashion for many years after, even James Cameron had the vision for Avatar way back then, and that's 20 years ago, and he couldn't do what he envisioned without benefit of the right tools.
Yeah, no,
they just weren't.
And so, luckily he's still telling stories.
Exactly right.
Luckily, the technology is evolving more and more and enabling the stories to, become richer and present even, new aspects of them that we haven't thought of before, new visions of them.
And now, of course, fast forward, when we talk about being a digital storyteller, we have even more technology in more people's hands in a smaller form factor with smartphones and tablets where, you're just limited by your creativity. That's really about it.
Yeah, no, I think that one of the things, that I, in a speech that I made at the conference, and I don't think it was interpreted the way I wanted it to be, but I think that, and I'm going to get on a soapbox here, so pull me off if you need to, but I was really struck by the fact that as a society, certainly the Americans, have the ability, we tell the most expensive digital stories that there are. We create 30-second stories that cost $1 million or more, and I'm speaking of commercials. Mm-hmm. And we sell ourselves in these 30-second moving stories, utter crap, things that we really don't need, that are not basic, that are, and I spoke at the conference about, really would love to see people take this kinds of funding and these kinds of tools and create stories that led us in directions that empowered us to be a better society, that brought about, change for the better. And certainly it's something our world could use, that's for sure.
Well, that's a perfect segue for me to ask you the question. What do you think the secret is to telling a story that will move people to action? Well,
first of all, I think that we do move people to action. I wish we moved them to actions that I felt were more becoming, more valid, more credible, more needed, more whatever. But I think, I certainly think one of the things is authenticity. I think that when you have passion and you can communicate that with clarity and authenticity, I think that is powerful.
Yes, I agree. And I think that this generation of millennials is really pivoting around the notion of authenticity more so than any previous generation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
To me, I think that's just the way to go. I mean, I don't know of any other way to be. I think that there's no point in wasting your time in anything else. It's that's just gaming the system, and it's not of any particular interest to me.
Well, I surprised you to know that we're in alignment about that concept. But I wonder if you have thoughts, Lisa, about the concept of story doing. Apparently, there's a book out, Ty Montague's book, True Story: How to Combine Story and Action to Transform Your. And I wonder how you think this concept applies in the digital arena.
Well, first of all, right now I think that let me step back a second. I think we're all storytellers. Storytelling is so pivotal. It has always been to me. I can remember when I was a young girl, and my grandmother had 10 children, and the 10 children, the wives spent the summers in the Catskill Mountains with the grandchildren, and the husbands would come up on weekends. And I would sit at the table while my aunts, 6 aunts, with my mom, would sit around with my grandmother and tell the story of our family. And there were the ones that were told over and over again, and to this day, my children can tell, Nana did this and she did that, and she would say, and they would, even her voice, they have her voice down. And so I think families do pass on, their history that way. I know I gave a speech at Cal Poly once, and I was asked to speak about communication, and I think that we are as a species, the humans really have a need to say, I was here, this is who I am. And I know I felt that when I saw my first, cave painting with the hand on the wall of the cave. Somebody put their hand there to say, Joe was here.
and I mattered and I made a difference, ideally.
Yes. So I think that what you're seeing now with some of the tools that are in the hands of, everyone who has a phone has a camera, and they are taking, as you know, more pictures are taken with an iPhone than are taken with anything else. People are taking pictures and communicating their life stories constantly today. And so we are all storytellers. I think that the technology is enabling that.
Yes.
I think, and we're starting to see, it's all digital today, we're starting to see one of the things that's really kind of interesting to me is what's happening with the blending of, kind of digital, telling about something, kind of telling a story about something, and then infotainment. I mean, infotainment, I look at what Will Ferrell has done with Funny or Die.
Yeah.
And you start to see those things breaking through this cacophony of noise and sound. So I think we have to think about how we can make our stories more powerful. Sometimes it happens because you have like a little girl who's been shot in the head but is going to carry on educating women and making that her mission and refusing to be silenced regardless of, people stop and listen to that story. It is so powerful.
Agreed. And social media really amplifies a lot of that too these days.
Yeah, and I didn't really read the book. I can't say that I read the book. I know about it. And what I know about it, really from my experience, and I think this aligns with Apple, is that it's the experience of brand. The idea of combining story and action is really making sure that there's alignment of every touch point of the business so that it supports the story, the essence of the brand.
Yes. And hopefully an authentic, aligned way.
Yeah. No, I think that alignment is critical. I'm working with a woman up here, Carol Sanford, really interesting. She is an educator, a consultant. She works with many large companies, and she really talks about the essence of the business. What was that seed that got planted? That kernel that grew the business. I think that one of the things that has been so positive for Apple was the clarity of that seed and the vision
and the passion.
And the passion. What was important? And when the companies align with that, I think it's good for business. When the company, when you start to see the customer experience not align with that, you start to get run off the tracks.
Indeed.
So I think to that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just think that my sense is that Montague with his book is kind of speaking to that. And if I have understood it correctly, then I certainly would agree with that being incredibly important to businesses, for businesses to thrive.
I would agree. And I would like to sort of move on with the time that we've got remaining, Lisa, and talk a little bit more beyond Apple about some of your current endeavors. I understand you're on the board of the Washington Business Alliance and helping them create Plan Washington, which addresses environmental and other major goals for the state. Could you tell us a bit about the higher purpose you're trying to serve through this work? And do you think sustainability could use a news story?
Well, yes. Yes, yes, and yes. So the Business Alliance was started by two interesting gentlemen, Howard Behar, who is the ex-president of Starbucks, and David Giuliani, who is the founder and CEO of Clarisonic and Sonicare. And they both, two, very successful business leaders. One is, I won't tell you which is which, but one is a Republican and one is a Democrat. And they say, this isn't working. And looking at Washington State, we're looking at the trajectory of some critical issues, and we're not going in the direction that we would like to go. And so Howard and I both mentor at UW, and so Howard said, I think you should join us on the board. And what the Alliance, and I did. So what the Alliance is looking to do, we did a lot of research in, kind of what really could make a difference to the state, and really it came down to where we felt we could make a difference in one area was to, first of all, take our business skills and apply them. In business, we would no more dream of starting off spending money and doing things without a strategic plan and specific goals, and accountability for those goals, and working to aligning to achieve those goals.
Right.
We wouldn't do that, and so that's what Plan Washington is. So regardless of what happens in the legislature and in Olympia, we're going to create a yearly Plan Washington that has specific goals. Environment is one of them, economic development, et cetera. Health is another. We're going to focus on those issues, do a lot of outreach, and bring people to the table to discuss how can we move towards these goals and achieve better outcomes for all citizens of the state. So that's one thing that I'm involved with that I feel really excited about.
Yeah, I love it for you. It's a perfect fit. And this concept of whether sustainability could use a news story, maybe you could sort of elaborate on that if you have some thoughts.
Well, I'm not an expert in sustainability. I did have a company for a short time. We were looking at the publishing market and really thinking about how we could help the graphic communication industry become even more sustainable. But the market went south. The timing was bad. Nevertheless, obviously as a citizen of the world, I feel really important. I have a grandchild. I want him to have a future, and I want him to have habitat he can live in. We're seeing some horrible things happen, kind of locally in droughts and what's going on here across the West right now. So I think that, sustainability is unfortunately seems to be somebody else's problem. And really it's about, we were looking at it as natural capital. We have assets as, on the planet, and they are assets, and they have financial association. It is going to make a difference to me personally when I turn the tap on. If I can have clean water if I can have any water come out of the tap, but if I can have clean water come out of the tap, that's worth something.
Agreed.
And we have to protect those assets. And if you need to see it in a financial way personally, see it that way. But we have got to, attend to that. So I don't want to make sustainability somebody else's job. I just want us to see.
I agree with you, and again, it might be a generational thing. I'd love to get your take on this. But when I was growing up, there was this commercial with this Indian crying while people were throwing litter out the window of cars. You remember that? Iron Eyes Cody?
Do.
And it left a deep imprint on the kids of my generation for sure, wherein I can't walk by a piece of litter without picking it up. Yeah. And that was, of course, the goal.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think, that was a story that was told practically, that was 20 seconds. That was a 15-second or 30-second spot. And yet, think how powerful both of us still remember it.
Yeah.
It changed our behavior. And so, again, I speak to people who are creating those commercials and say, let's try to do something that makes us better instead of selling us junk. How about that?
Agreed. Comes full circle. And speaking of coming full circle, we started off this conversation around the concept of education, and you've said before that you're all about education, and I wonder how you feel about our current education system. Do you think it needs to be disrupted, and do you actually see digital storytelling as having an important role in that?
Well, yeah, I think as a teacher, I think that storytelling is just a marvelous tool, a creative tool to really entrance children, to inspire them to do all kinds of things. And at the risk of having an opinion, I will tell you that I think that we are putting Band-Aids on a broken system that is it's just totally infuriating to me. We have a system that essentially was created for an agrarian, 19th century society, and we're trying to, fill the holes in a 20th century system. And we have No Child Left Behind, great idea, but then, you better fund it, and it hasn't been funded. So you're going to get, states unfortunately, we could go into this, we could talk for a long, long time. One of the things that I do feel is key is that if you look at the problem of fresh, I think you need to look at what do you need to educate for? Why are you educating? We're educating for a 21st century society. We're not educating for a 19th century agrarian society.
Right.
And there are different skills. The average person by age 45 will have held 18 jobs. That's not the way it used to be, and we'll be in a global competitive society.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very much, to put my Apple hat on, I'm very much thinking that we shouldn't be talking about STEM. We should be talking about STEAM, and that means bringing in the arts, design and music. If you really want to create engineers thinking of the 21st century, you better be thinking about music and design as part of the training. And we've wiped that out in most schools.
We need both sides of the brain engaged. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
In order to have a whole society. And again, this is where the arts comes in, and it's so valuable. And speaking of that, I don't know that a lot of our listeners who know you from being the technology leader that you've been know that you have embarked on your passion for photography. And I would like to talk about you as a creator and a little bit about what you're doing with photography and, how that's impacting how you're spending your time these days.
Well, you get to a certain time in your life, and my circumstances changed. My husband passed away, and I kind of had to think about, okay, I'm not a wife anymore. Who am I? Right. And what am I going to do with this change of, I didn't have to be home for anyone anymore. It was a change of circumstance, and just serendipitously, for some reason, I just felt the need to get in my car. I got in my car with a camera, and I hit the road for a little over a month, and it was really, it changed my brain. I just really, first of all, I had been working around creative people and working for creative people, and I said, hell, my runway is running out. I better start thinking about if I'm going to exercise that creative muscle, it better be now.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Although I don't want to agree that your time is running out. I don't necessarily align with that statement, but I get the point.
Okay. So, I said, I'm going to do it. I am going to just explore that portion of myself, and it was incredibly satisfying, just really life-changing, and so much so that, I put my photography out there. I had some friends who said, wow, this is a different you. And I had a lovely friend who was an artist who had an exhibition of my work down in Santa Barbara, which was in his atelier, which was really lovely. And so I put up a website, and we'll see how that goes. But the process of creativity and exploring creativity was so powerful that actually I'm launching another new business. I'm taking a group of women to Barcelona next spring for a creative reboot.
Wow.
I think
I love it.
Well, you're welcome to come. Let me know if you're interested.
I was going to ask comes next for you, and that you're answering the question in part.
This is, I'm working with the Alliance. I'm on a board with the state of Washington in economic development in the Department of Commerce, and I do the mentoring, and I'm doing a little bit of tech, but I also need to, it's a small business venture. We're going to do it every May. The idea is to move our bodies from our places of comfort, go someplace else, in the world. And I went with my business partner, Kathleen Kaiser. You may remember Kathleen from the Seabold Conference. She and I have been, remained friends over the years. And we went and spent last May in Europe. And I was just blown away by Barcelona. Every minute was, shooting. There's so much, it's creativity, but it's individualism. They prize the individual and the individual spirit. And so it's just such a beautiful place that we thought this would be a good place to take our women.
And so you'll do that next spring. And then will you rotate the locations you go to from year to year, do you think?
I think that we may do Barcelona for a couple of years, and then we've picked out a place in Italy that we're exploring as well for one after.
Well, I love this for you. I think this is fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
And it does put me in mind of the transition point that you had that led you to do the photography. Puts me in mind of a similar experience. You might recall my connection with Julian Lennon, John's older son, the musician. And he had a similar, he got disillusioned with the music industry and took a year off and just went everywhere with his camera. And that led to a second career that's equally as powerful for him right now as a noted photographer, a celebrated, awarded photographer. And
wow. Okay. So, there was something there, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. But I think that it's also a factor of not being siloed. The freedom with photography or any of the creative arts, where for so long you're a musician, you can't do anything else, or you're a photographer, you can't be a filmmaker. And again, I'd like to believe that some of the work we did together and the tools that we helped create during the time at Apple was all about liberating creatives and this cross-pollination of creativity.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so it does come
Masters of Media, was a wonderful program. It was so exciting to be on a platform that brought all these tools together, and it's growing. I mean, there are more tools now than ever, and accessible to more people.
Yes,
which is really exciting.
Well, I just loved our conversation, Lisa. It's wonderful to be back in touch with you again and get to co-create, a chunk of time to reminisce and talk about what comes next. It's just been a delight. So thank you for taking the time out.
I enjoyed it very much. Yeah.
And I want to thank our listeners as always. We look forward to having you with us each week on the show, and our wonderful show producer, Jessica Mastor. So thank you all. Have a wonderful week, and we'll hear you again next week on the next edition of All Access Radio. Good night, everybody.